I began in high school kind of on free time to take pictures. A couple of my teachers were doing photography, and we were offered classes after school. So I started and I got hooked on it. And I really fell in love with photography, and I was able to, during high school, to go to work at a local newspaper in my hometown in Sweden. And I started out by carrying the photographers' bags, the press photographers' bags. Very heavy bags at that time because they used the old heavy Nikon cameras in the 80s, early 80s, mid-90s. And then they let me into the dark room. They started teaching me about the magic about making prints. I finished my degree in photography, and then I did my military service. In Sweden at the time you had to do military service, so they have a newspaper. So I was able to do my military service as a photographer for a year. So I was traveling around all over Sweden and even to Russia and a couple other places to do stories about military issues for the conscripts. And then I was around 20. I came back to my hometown a bit, but then I moved to Stockholm, started freelancing as a photographer, and I got more and more into it, and then I decided I want to go to New York. I kind of got a contract with a Swedish newspaper, offered a contract at the largest newspaper at the time to work in New York, which was quite amazing. They had a staff photographer and he was moving home, so I was offered a couple of years. So that's how I started, kind of internationally. So based in New York, I did a lot of work around the early 90s first. And then I started my own projects. One of the first projects I did was on the Mexican border in San Diego. I followed a family. I went to Cuba, I went to some news events. I covered Kosovo, Cambodia. I went to Haiti in the mid-90s. Then in 1994, I went to South Africa to cover the elections in April 1994. I'd never been to South Africa before, or Africa. So I went there with hundreds or even thousands of journalists because this was a huge world event. Nelson Mandela was supposed to be president, first elected. So I spent like 5 weeks traveling around, covering the election campaign, following Mandela day and night, and it was fascinating. That's where I started my kind of love affair with South Africa and started working on all these different stories and projects since the last 15 years. I went to Congo and a couple of places, so I decided this is a place for me to be. The perception of Africa is that it's a dark continent. It's a huge continent with a lot of social ills and famine and HIV/AIDS and genocide and all this political corruption, nepotism and all these things. I think Africa is an amazing continent. It's so large. You've got so many. I mean, if you go to North Africa, you have a totally different Africa. West Africa, East Africa, you have Southern Africa. There's so many different cultures. You cannot say it's one Africa. You've got to really go on this. Also with the land, there's Arabic Africa. It's very different. So Africa is huge. We have 53 countries and lots and lots of different cultures and people. So even African people are strangers to each other. I mean, it's more democratically elected governments than ever in Africa. It's a much more awareness of what's going on in the rest of the world. A lot of Africans that lack education, basic education and then higher education. Because if you have education, I think most children can get the same chance. And I can see that because I have supported and helped quite a few children that's come from nowhere, and if they get school, they get a proper chance, they can do anything. And I think that's the same anywhere in the world. So I love Africa. I'm very positive about Africa. I think now it's very exciting in Africa also because there's some positive stories coming out of Africa. Some of the fastest growing economies in the world actually is African right now. And this has a lot to do with mineral resources, but it's actually a black middle class, African middle class, growing very fast in many countries. And the internet and the faster cell phones are exploding so it's made it much easier with communications, roads are built, and there's actually a lot of foreign companies and European companies and others that look in a different way now at Africa, because Africa is actually happening. Africa is rising, they're using that name. And some, they call it the lion economies. In Asia we had the tiger economies, but now we have places where there's 10% growth. So there's a lot of exciting things. I've been working a bit in doing a lot of fashion in South Africa, like fashion weeks mainly. I got into fashion, I got a lot of designers, and now I'm doing that, expanding that project around Africa, and it's amazing. There's so much interest in fashion designers, fashion weeks. I think I find in fashion it's a lot of beauty, and that's happening a lot in Africa, so I really enjoy photographing that. And I think many places, like in South Africa, like in Soweto, you have fashion everywhere. There are kids, young kids, that are dressed up. They try whatever money they can find, get from their parents, they try to mix and match different things. Sometimes it doesn't look that great, but they're doing something different, they're doing something their own, they're creating styles. My new book is my first proper book, real book. It's called Rainbow Transit, and it's chronicling my work in South Africa since the mid-90s. I managed to get a deal with Dewey Lewis, the English wonderful man. Got a deal, and I also got in touch at the same time with Teun, amazing designer from Amsterdam. And so we started talking and decided to work together, and then we had kind of a, well, it's been a year now, the process has been a year to design the book back and forth, and I actually printed it out. I think a style, you build up a style, it takes time to build up, know what you're doing and build up a style. It can take years, but I think it's important because and I tell many photographers, young photographers, that you really need, in the beginning you have to do different things to find what you want to do, but you must develop your own style, and then you have to work and refine that for a long time, year after year. I use Canon 5D Mark II cameras. I only use digital since I shot digital the last 7 years. So I have 2 Canon 5D cameras and 2 lenses, basically, fixed lenses. I don't use zoom lenses. I edit all my pictures on my own. I used to read more, do more, and that's why I want to get the point with all the... years ago in the beginning, I used to read a lot. I used to prepare a lot. If I go on a trip on a time, I read books and do a lot of research. With the media nowadays, with so much flowing and coming, and I tend not to read too much nowadays when I do story. I want to stay fresh, because if you search on something, if you reduce it, there's so much available that you can get very confused. I like to have my eyes fresh when I go out and take pictures. But obviously I need to do some research, I need to know the basics, but I don't want to know too much. I want to discover things. And a lot of times, even I'm doing a project in Soweto now, I know this place in and out, and I have fixers, I have people who help me to find things, and I go around. But I really like just going out, just walk. I drive somewhere and I walk for hours. I go early in the morning. I take a whole day and just walk, or half a day. I just walk around, I go to the next place. I don't want to see that. I want to experience things. There was a story came out in Northern Cape, in kind of middle of nowhere in South Africa, where an 8-month-old baby was suspected has been raped by someone or a relative or someone. So it hit the newspapers and the local TVs, and then it became news worldwide. And that actually opened a big issue in South Africa, which has been hidden. And this little girl was actually raped by later it was by a family member who was actually, there was a boyfriend of the mother who they have separated. So the boyfriend actually did it to revenge. of the mother because she was angry at the mother. Usually that happens, but a lot of times it happens because a lot of men think that they can be cured of HIV/AIDS if they have sex with a virgin, or the same way they think they can be cured if they have sex with an old woman because they have not been sexually active for many years. So a lot of old women are also sexually abused and raped in South Africa. It's actually a horrible story, and these things happen all the time. So I got this assignment for a German magazine, Stern magazine. I had not done anything. I thought it's going to be a very, very difficult story to do. So I started doing research and talked to the doctor, and actually the child was brought to Cape Town, to the Red Cross Children's Hospital in Cape Town, and we started talking to the hospital, and we actually managed to get there and meet the mother and actually eventually meet the child also. It's an absolutely horrible experience story. And then I started thinking what I could do to illustrate the story. So I obviously went back to the little village where it happened and tried to capture daily life there. And we found a place where perhaps 70–80% of people are unemployed. The bars were full, people are abusing alcohol tremendously, and kids grow up very quickly. Young girls, teenage pregnancy is very high, people drop out of school, so the social conditions are very, very bad in these areas. But obviously that doesn't give anybody the right to attack or abuse a child or a baby, and there must be something else, and people start blaming apartheid, whole South Africa, or system, or so I started doing this, photographed the village, and then I went to work with the Child Protection Unit in Cape Town, which deals with these things and abuse of children and women. Most of my work, and especially my projects, long-term projects, I have a very close relationship with the people I photograph. I tend to come back a lot of times to the same people, the same area, same families, and spend time with them. Which is quite unusual, I think, being a photographer or photojournalist, because you usually run from place to place. But I've been working on stories in South Africa that I come back for 5 years, 10 years, the same people that I've been working on and meeting. And even places like Congo, I've been back 5–6 years, once a year. And I see the same people, and I build up relationships with people, which is amazing. And that's one thing I really love also. Because we as photojournalists, we move around from place to place constantly, and we meet so many people quickly, and then we move to the next place. And it's very, very, very difficult. I think it's difficult for yourself. You think it's easy, but I think in the end, in the long run, it's very difficult to process all that in your brain. Because if you meet people and run and see all this, lot of social issues, it's one day it's going to affect you. I really care about the people that I photograph. I'm very, very... sometimes I don't even photograph when I meet people, or it takes a long time before I even take my camera. Or people I come back to, it can take half a day before I take pictures. I do